I got to my knees and lifted the lid to look inside. I wanted to find out what was going on down there. What I saw terrified me forever. There were 6 or 7 strangely dressed people. They surrounded a cage in which stood a gigantic evil creature. His body was black, but his eyes shone like lightning. The glowing eyes were the source of the light I noticed earlier. The creature's piercing shrieks resonated as the individual struck. Before we begin today's story, I have a small request. Please support the channel with a like, a subscription, and a comment. That's the biggest support you can give us, and what helps us keep creating content. Thank you so much to everyone who supports us, whether with a like, a share, or a comment. Now, let's start today's story. I like to go running after dinner every night at college. I was known as the bravest boy in our gang. I've always been adventurous and willing to take risks. I live in a small town. After my parents died, I inherited their house. I set up an office space. I am a pro gamer, and I write for tech sites. I was completely satisfied with my life until this incident. It was a sweltering Monday evening. Worn out from work stress, I longed for a run post-dinner. I donned my gym gear and headed out. My neighborhood lies near an abandoned factory, surrounded by dusty trails leading into the woods. About 5 to 7 minutes into my run, I paused before the old factory. I remembered the scary stories my father used to tell about this factory. Many said that this factory hid a place for bizarre experiments, but one day a fire broke out and the whole place burned down. Since then, this land has become an abandoned place. I stared intently at the black, dilapidated structure. It still makes me shudder to think that crazy people were experimenting here. I finally shrugged and started running again. I decided to take a tour of the area surrounding this plant, so I will make a great circuit, and going around in circles will help me find my way back. I looked at my watch and saw that it was 10 p.m. The factory stood right in the middle of the field. As I approached the entrance of the factory, I heard a noise. At first I couldn't identify it, but the further I went, the louder the sound became. The sound, a woman's cry, stopped me cold. Did I hear that right? Before I could process, another scream pierced the air. Without hesitation, I moved toward the factory. Its shattered windows and glass testified to years of neglect. After some deliberation, I pushed forward toward the entrance. Overgrown weeds blanketed the ground, making each step a challenge. The sound of the wind and crickets really made me feel like I was in a horror movie. Standing in front of the factory's main door, an inner voice told me that I shouldn't be there. I pushed open the half-broken door and tiptoed in. A large, empty hall stretched before me. The ground was covered with dust and all kinds of dirt. At the end of the hall, I saw an iron staircase leading upstairs. But the whole place seemed abandoned. I was wondering if I should go up, when I saw a thin ray of light coming from the floor under the stairs. I hadn't noticed it until now. I cautiously approached this area of the ground. I saw that a square trapdoor was laid on the ground. I quickly realized that this lid was just an entrance to the basement area. I'd heard enough bizarre stories about the experiments under this plant. There was even talk of a secret lab hidden under this property. I got to my knees and lifted the lid to look inside. I wanted to find out what was going on down there. What I saw terrified me forever. There were 6 or 7 strangely dressed people. They surrounded a cage in which stood a gigantic evil creature. His body was black, but his eyes shone like lightning. The glowing eyes were the source of the light I noticed earlier. The creature's piercing shrieks resonated as the individual struck within the cage. Suddenly my phone rang, captured the creature's attention. Its laser-like gaze poured into me, rendering me momentarily blind. Through the haze, I heard a man's urgent warning. Never stare into SCP-15's eyes. I bolted, running as fast as I could to escape. Though my vision gradually returned, terror propelled me home. Once inside, I slammed the door shut. That night marked the beginning of inexplicable changes in me. No matter my diet or routines, I rapidly lost weight. Even my neighbor, Madam Chairman, gaped at my appearance. Concerned, she asked, "Jeremy, are you very ill? Are you suffering from a serious illness?" "No." "I don't know, Madam Chairman," I said in a weak voice. "I have consulted my doctor and many others, but no one has been able to identify my problem. One night I was sitting in my kitchen having dinner. Suddenly I saw a black shadow moving in my garden. My stomach clenched with fear. The garden door is right next to my kitchen. The black shadow rushed to the door, and I saw the handle turn on its own. I ran to block the door to prevent anyone trying to get in. I almost slammed the door, and looking out the window, a pair of spotlights flashed behind the glass. It was the same creature I had seen, the abandoned kitchen. I was standing face to face with this demon. The only obstacle between us was my wooden door. I knew the door was nothing to this giant. How could he have followed me like that? I screamed for help, but no one heard my screams. The evil giant then knocked violently on the door. I was thrown with a huge force and fell to the ground. The door shattered before my eyes. SCP-15 was standing right in front of me. He opened his huge mouth. I saw sharp yellow teeth gleaming in his huge jaw. I screamed, knowing it was probably the last cry of my life. Then I fainted. I woke up in a hospital bed. 2 days after the incident, I was shocked to find myself alive. I asked the doctor if they had found the creature that attacked me. She looked at me mysteriously. "What do you think happened to you?" In a convincing tone, I said, "I was attacked. This demon attacked me. No one saw it. He has huge bright eyes. My God. His eyes." The doctor said, "Calm down, Jeremy. You were found unconscious at home. There were signs of break-in at your back door. Your neighbor passed by and thought you had been robbed and eaten. That's why they brought you here. You don't remember anything." My eyes frozen with terror, I looked out the window and said, "That means he's still out. It's still not." Maurice looked at me with terrified eyes and spoke. He tore the skull off the wall with his broken fingernails and lifted it toward his face. He didn't understand why, but he felt that this had to happen, that he had to wear the skull. The moment the bone touched his face, something terrible happened. His body began to change. His skin started melting, and he stretched his arms that suddenly became unnaturally long and horrifying. Then he began grabbing people and devouring them. Hours later, a team from the SCP organization arrived. It's a secret group that specializes in capturing strange and dangerous entities and locking them away in isolated places so they can't escape. Suddenly, the last member of the team, Emil Vasquez, didn't notice a long arm descending from above. The others didn't see anything, but they heard a muffled scream, followed by the sound of bones breaking, like someone being eaten. Before we begin today's story, I have a small request. Please support the channel with a like, a subscription, and a comment. That's the biggest support you can give us and what helps us keep creating content. Thank you so much to everyone who supports us, whether with a like, a share, or a comment. Now, let's start today's story. When Jamal opened the door of his bar, located in a very cold region in northern Canada, snow had piled up outside. When he pushed the door open, some of the snow blew inside with him. He and his wife struggled just to close the door again because the freezing wind kept pushing it open. The wind was incredibly strong, making it hard for them to shut it. Jamal couldn't control the door very well because his hands were full. He was carrying something strange, carefully wrapped in brown shipping paper. Once the door was finally closed, he walked inside the bar and placed the object on the counter. He began unwrapping it, but none of the regular customers paid attention. Everyone was busy, either talking or drinking the beer in front of them. The people inside the bar were the usual crowd: long-distance truck drivers, oil workers on weekend leave, and travelers who had come looking for adventure, but discovered that the region was far colder and harsher than they had expected. They spoke several languages, including English, French, and Algonquin, the language of one of the indigenous peoples of Canada. Everyone in the bar was drinking beer because it was the easiest way for them to warm themselves during the long, brutally cold winters of that region. Only one person noticed what Jamal was unwrapping. His name was Eddie, a construction worker from the area who visited the bar from time to time. Suddenly, Eddie felt a chill run through his entire body, not from the cold outside, but from something strange inside the place. He felt like danger was surrounding him, but he couldn't figure out where it was coming from. What Jamal had been carrying was a skull that looked like a deer's skull, with sharp antlers pointing upward. Jamal wanted to hang it on the wall as decoration, just like many bars display unusual items: old license plates, mounted fish skeletons, or strange objects from the past. But Eddie felt deeply uneasy. He had heard many stories from the elders of the region about creatures that lived in the darkness, creatures that were always hungry and harmed people, and somehow he felt that this skull was connected to those creatures. Eddie immediately stood up and walked out of the bar into the snow, the freezing wind, and the storm. He knew that if he warned the people inside, especially Jamal, they would laugh at him and call him crazy for believing in old legends and superstitions. But he was certain of one thing: anyone who stayed inside that bar was probably going to die, and he refused to be one of them. Jamal didn't even notice Eddie leaving. He was too focused on hanging the skull on the wall. Ever since he had received it in the mail, he had felt a strange hunger growing inside him. He assumed it was simply because he hadn't eaten lunch, and he told himself that after hanging the skull, he would grab some dinner and get rid of the hunger. At first, nobody paid attention to the skull. To them, it was just another decoration. But about an hour later, everyone in the bar began to change. They became restless and irritated. Some started scratching their skin and carving marks into the tables in front of them. Even the music playing from the bar's sound system changed into a strange sound, like the groaning of hungry stomachs. Soon, people began drooling as their hunger grew stronger and stronger. Their eyes slowly turned towards the skull hanging on the wall, as if it were calling to them. Then they began hearing a voice inside their heads, a whisper: "Respect your hunger. Eat, eat, eat." In their minds, they began seeing vivid images of red meat, fresh and tempting. They started staring at each other with strange expressions. The voice continued whispering, "This is what you were meant to be. Take my place. Become what you were created for." Suddenly, everyone grabbed whatever weapon they could find. One man pulled out a folding knife, another had a hunting knife, someone else grabbed a fork and a kitchen knife, others picked up broken bottles or any sharp or heavy object they could find. Meanwhile, the skull seemed to watch them silently, without caring. Then the people attacked each other like animals, the entire bar filled with screams, growls, and the sound of teeth tearing into flesh. Everyone was trying to reach the skull. They felt that it was something precious, something powerful. It was the source of the thoughts inside their heads, pulling them closer without them even realizing it. Each of them wanted to possess it, so they could keep hearing its voice and doing whatever it commanded. It was as if the skull had completely taken control of them. Inside the bar, they fought until people began falling one after another. And in the middle of all that chaos, Jamal himself, wounded and covered in blood, climbed over the bodies lying on the floor. He reached the wall, tore the skull down with his broken fingernails, and lifted it toward his face. He lifted the skull to his face. He didn't understand why, but he felt that it had to happen, that he needed to wear the skull. The moment the bone touched his face, a disaster began. His body started to change. His skin seemed to melt and cling tightly to the bone. His body twisted and convulsed, and his back straightened violently. The people around him stepped back in fear because they realized the thing in front of them was no longer human. It had become something dangerous, something predatory. They could hear the bones in his body cracking as his arms and legs stretched rapidly at unnatural angles. His skin turned pale and sickly, and coarse hair began growing across his body. When he screamed, the sound came out like the roar of a wild beast. His lower jaw stretched open wider and wider until he had a huge mouth filled with thin, needle-like teeth. Long claws grew from his fingers, and the antlers of the skull seemed to grow larger and longer. He now looked like a completely different creature, something strange and terrifying. No one in the bar could move from fear. Then, the real horror began. He extended his arm, which had become horrifyingly long, and started grabbing people, devouring them. He grabbed one injured customer. Before the man could even scream, the creature closed its massive mouth over his face. That became the fate of everyone in the bar. Hours later, a team from the SCP organization arrived. This organization specializes in capturing strange and dangerous entities and locking them away in isolated locations so they cannot harm people. But about an hour before the SCP team arrived, the Canadian police had already come because people reported hearing screams coming from the bar. None of the officers who entered the bar ever came back out. Even the second police team sent to assist them never returned. When the SCP team finally arrived, they found the bar completely destroyed. There were bones, blood, torn clothing, bullet holes in the walls, and large bloody tracks in the snow outside. Evidence that whatever had been inside had escaped and killed many more people. Even the police horses had been completely eaten. All that remained were the torn saddles and pieces of metal horseshoes scattered across the snow. The team leader said nervously, "It must have been extremely hungry. Hungry enough to eat a horse." On the road leading to the bar, they found Eddie. He was heavily dressed against the cold. When they asked him what had happened, he said only one word: Wendigo. In the legends of Canada's Indigenous peoples, the Wendigo is a spirit or creature that is always hungry. No matter how much it eats, it can never be satisfied. Anyone who wears that skull becomes a monster, and anyone who even looks at it begins to feel overwhelming hunger and the desire to eat anything in front of them. No matter how much they eat, they will never feel full. The team returned to the bar and found massive footprints in the snow leading into the forest. They assumed the creature had escaped into the woods. The team leader ordered everyone to move together and stay close. Anyone who wandered off alone would almost certainly die. There were about 10 of them, armed with powerful rifles, knives, and even backup explosives. But as they entered the forest, they felt something strange. A strange heat coming from deep inside the woods, as if something extremely hot or burning was nearby. The team members had already identified the skull as SCP-33, also known as the Wendigo Skull. It was named after an old legend from the Algonquin tribe about a black hunger that never ends, no matter how much a person eats. But to them, at that moment, it was just an old tribal myth. They continued searching with their helmet flashlights, shining their lights across the trees and listening for any sound, footsteps or branches snapping. Suddenly, the last man in the group, Emil Vasquez, didn't notice a long arm descending silently from above. Without seeing anything, the team suddenly heard a muffled scream, followed by a horrible cracking sound. It sounded like someone was being eaten. Then he disappeared into the darkness. They fired their rifles wildly into the trees, but the creature didn't seem affected. Moments later, the monster rushed through them at incredible speed. It struck another member with its claws, killing him instantly. The team leader was slashed across the stomach and fell to the ground. Once the leader fell, the entire team scattered in panic. Each person tried to run for their life, not realizing that this wasn't just an animal or an ordinary monster. It was something darker, an evil force connected to the skull itself. The last thing many of them saw was the shadow of enormous antlers in the beam of their flashlights just before the creature grabbed them. The forest filled with gunfire and screams as the monster devoured them one by one. It became clear that the team had no chance of controlling this creature. It was far from a normal monster. The team leader, taking his final breaths, tried to call for help through the radio, but no one answered. With every step he took, his weapon felt heavier, and the pain in his body grew worse until he tripped over a tree root hidden beneath the snow and collapsed. He tried to stand, but couldn't. Suddenly, he felt a strange warmth and a terrifying calm as he lay there dying. Then, he saw the creature approaching in the beam of his flashlight. For the first time, he clearly saw its face. Its smell was horrible, and its teeth were thin and sharp like needles. But the leader suddenly smiled and laughed. In his hand, he was holding a grenade. He had already pulled the pin. He said only one sentence, "Enjoy your meal." Then, the grenade exploded. The explosion and fire allowed the SCP helicopters to locate their position. They had been watching the team's helmet cameras through a live feed. When they arrived at the site, they found Jamal's burned body. Over the radio, they reported, "Target neutralized." But then they found the skull lying next to the body, completely intact, as if the fire had never touched it. They carefully recovered it and placed it in a secure containment facility because it was extremely dangerous. No one knows what might happen if someone comes in direct contact with the skull, or worse, decides to wear it. To this day, the skull remains locked inside an underground containment site, waiting for another human, someone who will touch it, someone who will feel the unbearable hunger, someone who will devour everything in front of them and never, ever feel full. So be careful. If you ever see a skull like that, never go near it. Everyone in the room fell silent. Immediately, the crackling of wood burning in the fireplace created a gloomy atmosphere. John got up and headed for the bar. Rosie and I exchanged glances on the living room couch. My husband Maurice and I invited our friends to dinner. John and Rosie have been close friends for 10 years. I looked at Maurice and I said, "Aren't you exaggerating a little?" Maurice opened the living room window. A gust of icy wind blew into the room. Winter nights in Oxfordshire are truly unforgiving. Maurice looked out and stared at the dark valley for a moment, then said in a low voice, "We are the people of Tomby. Oxfordshire is stricken with an ancient curse. None of us can deny it." Rosie said, "But I agree with June. It's been a long time now. We should forget what happened 12 years ago." I threw wood in the fireplace and I said, "Maurice, close the window. It's really cold, you know." Maurice closed the window and sat down at the counter. Jean poured her a glass of wine and said, You know how it all started?" "Rose," he said in a sarcastic voice, "it would be fun to hear a scary story by this winter night, I think." I laughed and said, "Yes, a little count won't hurt, I guess." Maurice took a sip of his glass and stared into the burning fireplace. He stared at the fire for a moment and said, "This is scarier than any ghost story because it's not a story. This is a real and terrifying incident that happened in this town 12 years ago. I'm sure you all know the poem of the Crooked Man. There is a saying in our city that if you recite this poem aloud, you will be subject to the curse of the Crooked Man. The origin of this poem comes from a small house on the outskirts of our city. There was a man, but no one remembers his name. Everyone called him the Twisted Man. His back was broken and his legs were twisted, fractured. Out of desperation and because of the tortures of the villagers, he committed suicide. When the villagers forced his door, they saw his body hanging from a rope. His eyes were wide open, as if they were all staring at them. Not only that, some said that an evil smile marked his livid face. His spirit began to attack those who lived alone on winter nights. He would enter their homes, destroy everything, but let them live. Wow, a cripple, he's invincible. No one who saw it with their own eyes could say a word. Then he died that year. Then all of a sudden he disappeared and came back every 12 years. Since then he has come back from the dead and haunts this city. Today is the day he must take revenge on this city. There were only 2 ways to know he was there. In a muffled voice, Rose said, What are her 2 ways? Maurice looked at us and said, "The house he's targeting is cracking in the wall and roof and you can see it on the bodies of his victims." In a serious tone, John said, "My father told me that this incident really happened. A twisted man haunts our village." I couldn't hold back my laughter. I almost cried so much I laughed. My God, what is wrong with the men of our town? You're kidding me, I hope. Rose says, "This story really scares me. I shouldn't have asked you to tell it." Maurice, June said, "My dear, there were people who thought like you until they became victims or saw their loved ones become victims. You have to be ready, you can't beat him." My grandfather told me, if you hear him knock, never open. Then I lost patience, got up and said, "Okay, that's enough. I'm going to recite the poem aloud now and show you that it's just a made-up story. Nothing more." Everyone stood up, shocked. Maurice said, "No, June, you shouldn't say her name out loud. It's a curse." I began to recite the poem aloud. He was a crooked man who walked with a crooked step. He found a crooked room near a crooked fence. He bought a crooked cat who caught a crooked mouse and they lived together in a crooked little house. "Did something happen?" I asked after finishing the poem. Maurice was staring at the door, terrified. Rose was on the verge of tears. John listened carefully if anyone approached the door, but nothing happened. I sat down and said, "See, I told you so. Just a scary story. Come on, let's get to the table." During dinner, everyone began to relax about this story, but my husband did not address a single word to me. It worried me that I had gone too far with my joke today, but I wanted to prove to Maurice that he was afraid for nothing. John and Rose went home. After dinner, I had another glass of wine. Maurice read 101 moments sitting by the fireplace to break the awkward silence between us. I said, "You know, I was just kidding. Don't be mad at me." Maurice looked at me coldly and said, "I'm going to bed. Good night." I decided to sleep on it too. After 1 a.m., I got up and went to the kitchen. I was cleaning the remaining dishes when my eyes went to the ceiling above my head. I saw that a small crack had appeared there. For a second, my stomach clenched with fear. Has it already started? Did I really invoke the crooked man? But I came to my senses and realized that our house is very old. It is therefore normal to see such cracks and damage in old walls. The clock in the hallway struck 2 o'clock. I was about to go upstairs when I heard a light knock at the front door. My eyes were troubled. I realized I was drunk, so with a staggering step, I headed for the front door. Standing at the door, I said, "Who's there?" A whisper came from the other side. I asked again, "There is someone." No answer. I turned around and started walking. As soon as I took the first step, someone knocked violently on the door, almost chilling my blood. I turned around and yelled, "Whoever you are, I won't open." I ran to my room, terrified. The door was locked from the inside, but I could hear muffled sobs, like someone suffocating in pain. I tried to open it, but it was locked from the inside. I knocked on the door. "Boris, why did you lock the door?" The crying became louder. I pushed the door hard to break it. The door opened with a loud noise. What I saw next shocked me deeply. A bony man, tall and menacing, stood in the middle of the room. He grabbed my husband by the neck and twisted his arms like a puppet. I could see that my husband was paralyzed with pain. He lost consciousness with every crack of bone. I screamed with all my might when the creature looked at me. Yes, I saw his face. I saw the crooked man. I couldn't see my husband that night. When the neighbors came, they found me unconscious on the floor. Our room was devastated. It's been a year now since my husband died. He was in a coma for a month and then died in his sleep. I discovered the secret organization, SCP, that is trying to capture this creature. I heard they named the Twisted Man SCP. They say no one saw it and lived to describe it, but I saw it that night. If you can contact me, my mission is to track down my husband's killer and get it over with. I'm a scientist. The idea of how life arose on our planet has always fascinated me. I studied microbiology at a university in California. In my last years, I applied for a research internship in an experimental center. The institute kept a low profile, but as I worked there, I realized they were hiding something from us. My friend Emily and I both worked as interns. We helped the researchers in the lab and got a good salary in return. The learning opportunities were also interesting. One day, Emily and I were having lunch in the cafeteria. "Trust me, Christy, this place is boring. We should have taken the internship offered by our Lord. I mean, he was a good-looking kid," she said, laughing. I said, "Come on, stop being an idiot. I like this place." Emily rolled her eyes and said, "It's because you're so boring. We've been friends since the first day of Easter, so I never get offended when she makes fun of me. That's normal." Between friends, we were chatting while snacking when suddenly we overheard a conversation, okay? We prepared the room for the specimen. "You can tell them to bring it here tonight after everyone left." I followed the path and saw 2 men near our table, chatting with serious faces. When I noticed who had just spoken, our eyes met by chance. He looked at me and smiled. "Or I think someone likes you," Emily said teasingly. "Shut up, eat your meal," I answered, embarrassed. I immediately looked away and started eating in silence in 10-15 seconds. The guy came up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Damien. I'm a junior researcher here." Emily said, "Hello, we work as an enchanted intern. I'm Emily." The guy smiled at her and then said, "What's your name?" I looked at him awkwardly and said, "I'm Christy." Damien smiled and said, "Well, Christy, nice to meet you. I'll see you soon." "Oh my God, he's so into you," Emily said. I couldn't help but smile this time. Damien was quite handsome, and since then we started getting closer. Then he asked for my number. We went out a few times and it was nice when we were together. On top of that, he helped me in my work. I quickly understood that he was also very passionate about his profession. His culture and his quick wit often impressed me. 1 after 12 I was heading to Lab 203 when I saw Damien in the hallway talking to a security guard. As I approached, I heard him say, "Always check the lock on the door. We all have to be very careful with SCP, and specimens in research labs often carry code names, so at first, this didn't surprise me. But on the way back, out of curiosity, I asked him what is SCP. Damien has always been a careful driver, but at that moment he braked abruptly by accident. The car swerved and we stopped in the middle of the road. People started honking behind us. We could have been hit by a car. "What the fuck was that?" I screamed, scared. Damien said hesitantly, "I'm sorry, Christy. I just got distracted the whole way." We didn't say anything more. I stayed at his house that night. I was surprised Damien didn't even mention SCP. Despite my questions, something told me he was hiding information about this specimen. The next morning we went to work and I asked her again, "Huh? You didn't tell me what that SCP was?" Damien smiled as if he had completely forgotten about the incident, but I could tell he wasn't. He then said, "You know, sometimes we use various subjects for our research. This one is unique. It's like a microorganism, really. Can I participate in this research? That would add points for my dissertation." I said. Damien's face turned pale and he stammered, Okay, I still have to ask my superiors." We'll see if I can do anything. Until then, whenever I was interested in a project, Damien always included me, or at least let me tour the lab so I could learn for myself. But this time, his mixed reaction told me. That day, Damien avoided me and didn't even come for lunch. Emily said, "Sounds like your first couple's argument." "No," I sighed and said, "I don't know." Since I questioned him about the specimen, his behavior has changed strangely. "What specimen?" Emily asked. "I'm not sure. I heard him warn a guard about an SCP." Did I answer? Well, I also heard there's a secret thing in a lab in the basement," Emily said. "They have a lab in the basement?" Did I ask? "Yes, and interns have told me it's the most mysterious part of this facility. Apart from a few special researchers, no one is allowed inside," Emily said. I got to thinking, if SCP is just a microbe, why are there so many secrets around it? Suddenly, an idea occurred to me. Emily and I decided to explore the 3-story research institute to see if there was a separate lab for this mysterious specimen. But obviously we didn't find any such coin. I was certain this thing was kept in the basement lab. I came home from work and took a shower. When I got back, I saw 3 missed calls on my phone. It was Damien. I called him back and he apologized. He came to my house, we had dinner, and everything went back to normal. But I already had other projects in mind. Emily and I decided to infiltrate the building around midnight. I knew Damien still had the keys to the lab and the entrance on him. After he fell asleep, I took the keys and told Emily I was coming. I just wanted to know what the damn SCP was. When we arrived, the institute seemed haunted. The pale glow of the moon and the crickets made it even more sinister. We went through the gates very discreetly. We didn't want to attract any unwanted attention. After opening the main door, we headed for the basement. The door was locked with chains and a metal padlock. After 2 or 3 tries with different keys, we finally managed to open it. As soon as we went down to the basement, we understood why everyone was so secretive about this part of the research center. There was a long corridor, and believe me, there was only one room at the end. The door bore a large warning sign, and underneath a plaque identified the shy guy. "He's just a guy," Emily said in shock. I was shocked too. Damien told me it was a microorganism. But what the hell is going on here? Suddenly we heard crying coming from that room. We rushed over and Emily said, "Hey, are you okay?" But no one answered. Only a sobbing voice continued to moan in pain. Disgusted and annoyed by the cruel culture of this establishment, I began to unlock the door. I turned the key and a blue button started blinking just above the door. I was about to press when Emily stopped me and said, "Christy, I don't know if this is a good idea." I replied, "They do. God knows what crazy experiments on a poor human being. So yes, I think it's a good idea to unlock the door and release him without further hesitation." I pushed the button and a huge alarm went off. I realized you have to remove the key before you press the button. That was a clever trick to avoid security breaches, right? "Christy, what did you do?" I turned around and saw Damien in the hallway, his face horrified. The door opened, and before I knew it, I saw a long hand grab Emily and hurl her into the air. She screamed in terror and fell to the ground with a thud, then a frightening human silhouette and out of the room. The humanoid creature had very little muscle mass, clearly suffering from severe malnutrition. His arms were grossly disproportionate, giving him the appearance of nothing less than an alien. Screamed and started running to escape. Emily got up and limped behind me. I saw the creature speeding towards Emily. I came back to help him, but before I could reach him, the creature had grabbed him. She then did something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. She tore Emily's limbs apart like a broken doll, then began to devour her. I screamed again and again, but the creature wouldn't stop. I heard him chewing my poor friend's flesh. Soon after, a group of 7 or 8 guards came down the stairs. Damien pulled me out and the guards tried to stop the creature from escaping. I guess they managed to contain SCP-096 again. I could never forgive myself for acting like a stupid kid who let her friend die. Damien and I left the area, the Institute having ordered us to disappear. At one point, Emily's parents were told that she had died in a laboratory accident. I couldn't face her parents or my own guilt. I fled town, dropped out of school, and haven't spoken to my family in a week. If I do, I don't know how to even begin explaining the wreckage of my life to them. A 7-year-old girl and her 13-year-old brother are getting ready for their favorite after-school activity, watching television. Their parents won't be home from work for several hours, and watching TV together after school before having a snack is one of the highlights of their day. The boy takes his usual spot on the couch, while the girl sits right in front of the television and turns it on. Pretty Pony Paradise is about to start, and she never misses an episode. Her brother would rather watch something else, but he loves seeing his sister happy, so he always lets her watch the pony adventures. But today, when she selects the channel, a different program appears. Instead of the usual Pretty Pony theme song, circus music blares through the TV speakers. On the screen, bright, colorful words appear. Bobble the Clown. "Hey, this isn't Pretty Pony," she says to her brother, but when she turns around, She realizes he has fallen asleep. The girl isn't happy, but she decides to give this new program a chance. Maybe her pony show will come on right after. The circus music stops, and a cheerful-looking clown does a cartwheel. "Hello, children," says the clown. "Do you like to have fun?" The little girl likes having fun. After all, maybe this new show isn't so bad. She watches Bobble walk through the streets of a pleasant, ordinary, small American town. Everyone seems to enjoy the cheerful clown and waves as he passes. Bobble stops in front of a house painted to resemble a circus tent. This must be where Bobble lives. He invites the man inside, and the two of them enter the house. Inside, Bobble gestures for the man to sit while he prepares refreshments. The girl watches Bobble head into the kitchen. There, he begins sharpening knives and explains to the camera how to properly prepare meat, how to carefully remove skin from flesh, and how to preserve bones for future broth. The girl watches with fascination as Bobble delivers his unusual lesson. Maybe it's a good show after all. Maybe this will become her new favorite. The girl stands up while her brother continues sleeping and walks into the kitchen. She opens a drawer so she can reach the counter where the knife block sits and takes out a large meat cleaver. She watches it shine in the light, fascinated by its sharp, gleaming edge. The girl returns to the living room and climbs onto the couch beside her sleeping brother. She watches Bobble step away from a pot of red meat cooking and turn to the camera. The girl stands up and raises the cleaver. Bobble moves closer to the camera, his eyes fascinated, as if he can see through the screen, and is watching the girl. She slowly lifts the knife above her head as Bobble begins to whisper, "Come on, it's our turn," then licks his lips. The girl pauses for a second, looks at her brother still asleep, and brings the cleaver down. The static is rising and the broadcast has only just begun. I am your guide through the deepest darkness of the Foundation's archives. I am the Shadow Archivist, and you are watching Story from Shadow. If you want to survive the next containment breach, join our circle in the shadows. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell before the screen goes dark forever. Now, let's return to the file of SCP-993. SCP-993 is the designation given by the SCP Foundation to a children's television program titled Bobble the Clown. At first glance, Bobble the Clown appears to be a classic educational cartoon for children, featuring bright colors, a mascot, and a recurring structure in which the main character, Bobble the Clown, learns a new skill or begins a new activity. This program does not appear to have any recurring secondary characters, with Bobble being the only character who returns in every episode. The settings generally change from one episode to another, and Bobble is often seen in a new or unusual location. Although the program is intended for children, the anomalous properties of this strange television show manifest almost immediately. First, any person over the age of 10 who watches the program will immediately lose consciousness at the beginning and remain in a comatose state until the broadcast ends. Upon waking, they report experiencing a severe throbbing headache just before losing consciousness. However, the most disturbing aspect of this show is what has been reported by viewers under the age of 10. They claim to see Bobble the Clown giving instructions comparable to those found in many children's programs, promoting good hygiene or encouraging going to bed early. However, Bobble's lessons are somewhat different. The subjects he discusses include torture, murder, and even cannibalism. When young viewers watch the program, the lessons appear to embed themselves in their minds, and repeated exposure causes permanent effects similar to symptoms of psychosis and schizophrenia. Among the known episodes of Bobble the Clown is Bobble in the Big City, in which Bobble appears in a large American city resembling New York, and explains to viewers different ways to avoid fire detection when starting fires using common household items such as mosquito coils. The episode ends with Bobble setting fire to a large building before disappearing from the screen. The camera remains focused on the burning building for several minutes, during which screams can reportedly be heard. In another episode titled Bobble's Sneaky Saturday, Bobble is once again in a large city, this time resembling London, England, with the Elizabeth Tower housing Big Ben visible in the background. In this episode, Bobble is seen calmly following a woman as she walks home. Once she arrives, Bobble attacks her with a large butcher knife before giving viewers advice on how to remain unnoticed in crowded places. Bobble discovers the truth. The clown appears in a prisoner of war camp, where Bobble tortures a captured soldier while asking him absurd questions the soldier cannot answer. This continues until the prisoner dies, after which Bobble details methods for inflicting painful but non-lethal injuries. Bobble Hates You is one of the most disturbing episodes in the series. It shows Bobble sitting in an empty room, silently and angrily staring at the viewer for 30 minutes. But the strangest episode is one whose title contains multiple profanities, and in which Bobble appears to be inside a video archive room at a secure Foundation site, the same room where recordings of Bobble the Clown are stored. In this episode, a completely enraged Bobble presents methods for breaching the containment systems of several SCPs. Then he provides personal details about the researchers assigned to those SCPs, including their daily routines, before suggesting various ways to assassinate them. Another notable detail about this episode: at one point, an animated representation of an SCP Foundation researcher can be seen walking past Bobble. A clock on the wall shows the time, and that same researcher later confirmed that he did indeed walk through the video archive room at that exact time, though he does not recall seeing a clown filming a television show there. Episodes of Bobble the Clown continue to be broadcast from an unknown source. However, future broadcasts will be intercepted using Protocol Upsilon Beta 3 in order to prevent public viewing. All transmissions are recorded for the Foundation archives and for continued research into the anomaly. Subjects under the age of 10 must be assigned to view the recordings. Once the viewers describe what occurred in the episode, they are to be immediately administered a Class A amnestic. Now, discover another entry from Dr. Bob's files. And once again, thank you for joining me in my mission by subscribing, enabling notifications, and asking your friends to do the same, so that together we may continue exploring the classified archives of the SCP Foundation. Imagine him, folks, with his pale face, his big open mouth, his blank white eyes, a face you never hoped to see in your life, not to mention his almost dead skin clinging to his bones and his incredibly long limbs, inside his prison, sitting, covering his face, crying and moaning alone, crying as if he had lived horrors terrible for those who knew any facts about 096. Mostly all of them will have a feeling of terror, horror mixed with sadness and grief for this entity. That this entity with a simple mistake can kill every human on this planet and nothing will stop it, but it doesn't do this because it's bad or there's evil in it. If so, then why do you see it crying and covering its face all the time? It's not just you who asked that question. Guys, I spent hours of research and I uploaded to you how many videos in the channel to reveal the truth and origins of this entity. What makes this entity the most dangerous entity in the age? In Euclid, and he can bring about the end of the world. Why is this entity tearing? Anyone looking? And why is this happening regardless of everything we guys have seen before in the channel on this subject? In this video we will see one of the most important files of the organization from Dr. Bob's channel, if not the most important file that reveals to us the full truth of what happened and created what we know as 096, known as the Shy Man or T-Guy. Brace yourselves, community of goodness, because the story behind this truth, as much as it is terrifying and bloody, is considered one of the most sad and painful. I want dead guys, before we dive into the video, to thank all the gang that joined the channel. This really brings together very motivating, so thank you from the bottom of my heart. It all started in a small hut in a small village in Nepal, just a few kilometers from the Chinese border, where there is the summit of Everest, the tallest mountain in the world, which represents a great challenge for every adventurous climber who has courage and perseverance. This was one of the dreams of explorer and adventurer Andrew Irvine, who was sitting in one of the cozy corners of the cottage enjoying a bowl of lamb broth. And with it a glass of chong, which is a popular drink in that area. As evident from his adventurer's nickname Andrew, he had come a long way to get to this place. The inhabitants of that village in the hut were giving him some looks that indicated lack of exercise. They have seen many like him smiling enthusiastically, full of confidence that they are among the elite few who will survive reaching the summit of Everest, many of whom are still frozen at the top of the mountain. One of the residents should have spoken to him, and this is what an elderly man who speaks only a little English did encourage and see in front of Andrew, and tell him that whatever he thinks he'll find at the top of the mountain, honor, glory, gratitude, whatever, he had better go look for it elsewhere, because only death in the snow awaits him there. Andrew, a young and enthusiastic adventurer full of confidence, answers him that death awaits only those who have not worked hard enough and have not prepared themselves properly. He goes on to say that he has climbed other mountains before in different parts of the world. The Everest seal doesn't scare him, it's just a challenge. The old man will get through it. He has lost hope that he can influence Andrew. He is too arrogant to take his advice. He looked at him and said that everything has become confidence and pomp these days. But tell me, what will you say or do when you meet the king there? According to Andrew Dannon, the king is the mountain itself. He smiled and replied to the old man, "Don't worry when I meet him, so I will take his crown from him." The old man had nothing left but to leave Andrew's table after failing to try to. Something of this adventurous fate, her conscience now would be at ease at least. The adventurer Andrew, who did not care for anything that was said to him, and for the looks of the inhabitants of the area that it was his dish of lamb broth, and went to the room he rented upstairs, was full of enthusiasm because tomorrow is the day promised every month of his training. It will finally show its effectiveness. He'll climb Everest. The achievement of his life would be an achievement. He's not ready to forget it, even if he wanted to. The next day, Andrew climbed the mountain towards the top. The weather was very difficult, and he is at a height of approximately 2,000 meters, and every meter he climbs is more difficult than the one before. The cold was very severe, causing unbearable pain, but this does not matter Andrew Kandro very much. He remembers the old man's words that death awaits him. The adventurer Andrew has never felt alive and vital as he now feels as he continues and climbs further, as he tries to control his breathing and searches with his frozen hands under the glove. On any point he can lean on to pull himself. All this needs stamina. A normal person can't bear it, but Andrew is equipped and trained for all this. No room for error where he is. One wrong step and he will end up hard frozen somewhere on this mountain. Since this place is so dangerous, the bodies of the adventurers who died here are never recovered, as their grandmothers who could spot them because of the colorful climbing clothes they wore filled the mountain. Some consider these bodies a warning sign of what awaits them there. Others, more arrogant, consider them references that indicate that they are on the right path. Andrew climbs for another few hours, ignoring his most pain, trying to push his limits. degree until he reached a considerable height where he found shelter. So he set up a sago camp and began to eat some of his food savings. To his credit, the shelter he found did not pass through the blizzard, which helped him sleep without being exposed to the deadly cold. Tomorrow was a more difficult day for him than this. As he tries to sleep, he raises his head to the top of the mountain that appeared to him. For the first time he sees it as greater and bigger than ever he has seen it before, as he begins to wonder, will he make it to the top or will he die? But as he closes his eyes to sleep, guys, he never thought about the possibility that just might be worse than death. In the days after, Andrew climbed the mountain so much that he exceeded the height imposed by biology. A man should not overstep it. It was impossible to break his fork. He had been through too much to stop. Here there is no room for surrender. Otherwise everything he has done will have no meaning and he will be a failure like most people who live on this planet. His life would not be hers. He will leave no legacy after his death, and that is what terrifies him more than his death in this place. Finally, after a great struggle to reach an area of 8,000 panicked that is known as the dead zone or death zone, a zone where it is classified as inhospitable, where breathing is almost impossible, Andrew was able to see the corpses that are considered a reference to continue on the way up and understand that he only has 1,000 penasas left to reach the summit. He is now one last step away from conquering the summit, and at this moment Andrew is surprised when he sees another climber in front of him coming down from the top and advancing towards him in a strange way of walking. This person was wearing a traditional white climbing suit. Andrew could only see the features of his face, it seems, glasses he wears. The moment Andrew laid his eyes on this stranger's glasses, he began to feel a comfortable feeling, a feeling of pinching cold. The icy wind he was feeling disappeared. He began to feel the opposite, began to feel unrest, sportiness, reassurance, just as if sitting in front of a warm fire in a cozy, otherwise safe cottage. Andrew would have welcomed all these beautiful feelings, but a skilled and experienced adventurer like Andrew knows very well that this feeling is one of the worst things that can happen to you in a place like this. It is the indicator that death is taking you, and your body accepts it. Even if this unknown is what generates these feelings, if one thing is certain, it really is. Very right when Andrew did used all this, he tried to retreat and flee, but he realized he couldn't, as if he was frozen in place. Andrew focused more on the stranger's glasses to notice something emanating from him like hot embers of a light orange color. Andrew wondered, are those eyes? Yeah, it's the eyes of this John Doe. Andrew, he's starting to feel it. More horrific look. He was so terrified by the look of this unknown, or rather this thing. And yes, that's not human, it's something else, but his. A human uttered this thing, and Andrew asked, why are you here? You want to challenge me? Andrew, he was powerless to say a word, and he felt the pain of the cold as if it had doubled, and the pain increased even more the longer this thing stares at him. And yet Andrew was able to speak up and ask this thing, what are you, to make this thing laugh and tell him I'm the king of the mountain. This thing, folks, is known to the organization as a 1529, and it's the worst thing that can happen to anyone trying to climb. Andrew begins to recall his conversation with the old man in the cottage when he told him, what will you say when you meet the king? He replied that he would remove the crown from his head, and now he was before the king. And in a state of terror and panic, Andrew only began to cry and beg the king's pity. Please have mercy on me. I just wanted to practice climbing. The owner of the mountain burst out laughing and told him, if you will climb and keep climbing, you will not stop climbing. The king, folks, had an impact. Andrew, to do what you will now see. With a mere shake of the king's head, Andrew found himself hanging on the edge of the mountain from which only his hands had come to bear his hanging body, as if he had returned to the moment when he had reached this height, and with the increase of terror which possesses him, and the extreme coldness which causes him unbearable pain, and at the same time, he felt the dreadful gaze of the king upon him with frowning eyes, which terror enters the soul and from which only absolute evil flows. Andrew struggled to pull himself from the ledge, and when he finally arrived and wanted to relieve his limbs from climbing, not a moment passed. The king shook his head again to find Andrew himself again hanging on the edge, the extreme cold and the unbearable load on the muscles of his body as he clings to the edge is the worst torment a man can experience, and the worst and terrifying that this torment does not end, because folks, it's been Andrew days, weeks, months, years. He lives this matter without the king letting him die, and this is despite everything: hunger, thirst, fatigue. Even Andrew's will to let himself fall to die and rest was taken away from him, as if the king kept him alive to live hell on the corners, a game he has been playing with all this year. Andrew's body, stripped of the ability to die, began the environment, and the hell he's living in changes shape at first due to the constant stress and terror he's living. He began to lose his hair. His face and skin became pale from lack of sleep. His body became more and more these because he was deprived of any nutrition. Because of the non-stop climbing, his limbs began to stretch. All this, and the Mountain King is still staring at him with those looks. Other years passed, and one day in which Andrew climbs the ledge, and in his reaction, which he does every time, he hides his face and weeps and shrinks, and the king begs to end this torment of appearances, that this was the owner feeling more pleasure this time. The owner answered him, "You wanted to climb, you wanted this hobby to be what would make you better than all human beings, but now you are not worth anything. Our adventure ends here, and we got bored of playing together." After these words, the king departed. Andrew couldn't believe he got rid of. Alone in this place in the death zone, finally, after what he thought was an eternal hell, he was able to get out of it. The climber Andrew returned to the village from which he started in the beginning, and he is now no longer a climber. Countless years have passed since his start that day when the old man who had died years ago spoke to him. Andrew advances further back to the village, covering his face and hearing only his steps and the strong winds. He is afraid, terrified, and in need of help. The sun began to rise and began to get closer to the village and its inhabitants as they began their day. They never expected that this morning something approaches them, something long and elongated, emaciated and pale, hairless, advances towards them, and makes a moaning sound, as if it were crying. The villagers had never seen anything like this before. It's like something out of this world. He saw the inhabitants, he thought they would help him, and when he revealed his face and saw their eyes as they looked at him, he saw in them nothing but the Baojin eyes that he saw in the king's eyes testified. The same eyes and looks that Andrew thought he had escaped from. Eyes and looks that meant nothing to Andrew but pain, torture, and madness. And even when Andrew covered his face with his hands, he still saw those eyes staring at him. Andrew thought, is he still in the mountain? Did he survive all that? Is it just an illusion? Is he still under the influence of the Mountain King? Is it all just an illusion created by the king? And a question rang in his head. What did Andrew do to live this hell? Is all this just the result of him having a dream of reaching the top of a fucking mountain? Did all this make him worth all this eternal torment? Andrew's emotions began to change from all of these to feelings of outrage and utter rage, the kind of outrage that soon led to the inevitable result, violence. Andrew screams a blood-curdling scream, the residents also scream in terror, and then the carnage begins. The thing that was once a climber began to tear apart the inhabitants who looked at it without any mercy. Even those who fled still felt their eyes looking at it. They must be eliminated quickly, and no one must be left among them. This is the only way for him. He feels again comfort and humiliation. And what appears to be a serial episode happened. The sound of the massacre aroused the dismay of other residents in the village, which made them come out of their homes, see what is happening, which means looking at what Andrew has become. This massacre happens, and seeing a face without them, having the awareness that this is a sentence for them to die in less than an hour. The village has become devoid of any life, in which there is only the thing Andrew once became. Andrew Irvine was a climber, is now an absolute thing. Strength fills him with feelings of loneliness, terror, and sadness. The thing that would later become 096 covers his face with his outstretched hands, weeping and groaning.